confessing to theft, but also cultural appropriation.
It could be. I could get an angry email from HR.
You will.
You know, one of the morning hosts says, "You
yes.
stole my time."
Highly unlikely.
Sorry. Oh, look, it's got a close-up shot there of my gut. Thank you so much, cameraman.
I wonder whose tie it is. Probably that guy Angus McDougley-ish.
Yes, who does the 6 to 9.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
OK, anyway. Right, let's have a look at those front pages for Thursday. The Daily Mail is leading with bosses must make allowances for menopausal women. The Telegraph is leading with Speaker on brink after walkout. The Guardian also has that story. The fury in Commons forces Speaker to apologise over Gaza vote chaos. The Times, respect the menopause or be sued, firms told. And the iNews also goes with the House of Commons story. And finally, The Sun, King's tears. And those were your front pages. Right, well, most of the front pages on Thursday are being dominated by a single story. And, Josh, you've got the details from The Guardian.
Yeah, fury in Commons forces Speaker to apologise over Gaza vote chaos. So the SNP put forward a motion to ask for a ceasefire or demand a ceasefire in Gaza, and because that will obviously work. And the wording was maybe slightly too harsh. So Keir Starmer put a new motion forward, also asking for a ceasefire, but the gist of it was that under certain conditions, i.e. that Hamas won't send any more missiles into Israel and be any more danger. So essentially saying, yeah, we want a ceasefire once Hamas have been destroyed.
Well, so the SNP's motion was broadly in alignment with the Labour Party's motion, but there were some details that were different, and this would have put Labour MPs in a difficult position had they been asked to vote on the
that's it. So the Speaker broke with convention and put forward the Labour motion instead of the SNP one.
Yes.
And people were very angry. If it had just been the SNP one, what would have happened was they're saying 100 Labour MPs would have voted for it against the whip's wishes.
And, of course, the upshot of that is because Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker, is of the Labour Party, it looks and smells a bit like collusion. What do you think about this?
Just a bit.
Cressida?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it looks like. Exactly. And I don't know whether this will impress the sort of average Palestine supporter or not, because really Starmer's ceasefire now, so long as Hamas are no longer threatening violence against Israel, it's almost not worth having.
Well, you know, nothing against the SNP or Labour, but I doubt very much a full day of debate in the House of Commons over this issue is going to make a damn bit of difference.
I mean, how much stuff has this country got to get on with?
Right.
We have a limited number of days per year, and one of them's just been wasted on this. And whatever motions get put forward by whichever political party, by any wording, makes absolutely no difference on the ground.
Which kind of means that the chaos that we saw in the House of Commons today is meaningless, Cressida, and it was chaotic. I mean, I saw some of the footage, people sort of shouting and storming about. I mean, I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times, but really, even by the usual standards...
Yes, it was very, very boisterous, wasn't it?
Yeah.
People clearly very angry, and now calling for the Speaker to leave, saying that they don't want him anymore.
I mean, it's a perennial problem, isn't it? Because the Speaker's got to be from one party or the other. We've had this with John Bercow in the past, who was accused of partisanship when it came to the Brexit vote, and similarly, Lindsay Hoyle is in hot water for a similar reason.
He's apologised. So, maybe we move on and deal with issues in this country?
What, things that we can actually do something about?
Maybe.
All right, well, fingers crossed for that one. Let's move on now, Cressida, to the Daily Mail on Thursday. What are they leading with?
OK, bosses must make allowances for menopausal women. So this story is saying that bosses have been warned they risk breaching equality laws unless they allow menopausal women to wear cooler uniforms and work from home on hot days.
Now, I'm not an expert on the menopause, but I was on the understanding that employers already do make allowances for women.
Well, you would think, wouldn't you? I don't know. They're calling
for... just fire them.
Well, they were in the good old days.
Yeah,
that's what they would have done.
Those are the good
times. Look, you know, I'm not a feminist. I'm not entirely...
You're sweating. Get out.
Well, look, this is very nice, but it doesn't get around embarrassment, does it?
No.
You know, which I personally think would still be a problem. The other story they've got on the Daily Mail is it's a story from a woman. It says, "I'm asexual but longed for a baby. That's why at 24 I spent £6,000 on a sperm donor." So it's really a woman's world, isn't it? Now there's a lot of wouldn't you say that's another woman's issue?
Well, she's part of the LGBTQIA+ community. Is
that right?
Yeah, she is.
Well,
asexuals are considered queer under the terminology.
That's so ridiculous.
I know it's so
What
ridiculous.
I'm getting at is that overall we've kind of won now, haven't we? You know, like
yes,
there's
maybe.
Lots of accommodations being made.
Can I
well
just
done.
say, though, you know, there have been, when we talk about LGBTQIA+, I mean, there have been centuries of genuine oppression against gay people, people being burnt at the stake for being gay, tormented, beaten, all the rest of it. No one's ever done that to someone who's got a low libido, right? Yeah. Asexuals are not oppressed, they just don't want to have sex. And no one cares but you.
Yeah.
No one cares.
She still had a pipette.
She's still got a pet, exactly. So does it? Oh, a pipette. Okay.
So a pipette. Sorry.
I thought you were being dismissive about the idea of a child.
Oh no, I meant little Willie.
I really do not want to elaborate on this, Josh.
Sorry.
I think you've gone into a very dark place.
Amazing.
It's the tie that's doing Angus's influence on you. Let's move on to this next one. This is the Times.
Yes.
Josh, what are the Times leading with?
They're covering similar stories, but they've got a very interesting thing down here at the bottom. All's well when pupils act out Shakespeare. So evidence now proves that that Shakespeare does improve emotional development and children's literacy, but the trick is they have to actually act it out. Yes. So when they actually get physical with the language and it embeds it, and it really makes a difference. But I think that the argument has always been within lots of lessons, not just English, but that's how kids learn in a very physical way.
It's full of physical things, isn't it?
Stabbing.
Yes, stabbing and good fun stuff like that. Witches round a cauldron. I remember doing Macbeth at school as a kid and being fascinated by all that. So I think Shakespeare is a good vehicle for this.
I've been saying this for ages. I do worry that Shakespeare is sort of being pulled out of various schooling systems.
He's very white.
They think he's a dead white man.
A white guy.
Which is exactly what he was, of course.
Maybe.
But
that someone's going to reinvent him.
Oh no, clearly, of course, he'll be reclaimed, or they'll do a biopic of him where he'll be sort of a disabled black woman or something. Yeah. But the point of it is that you're absolutely right. You do have to get kids to act it out so that the language. I mean, the language is not a million miles away from us. It's not like Chaucer. It's not Middle English. It's relatively modern, right? So you can understand it if you hear it out loud. And I get a bit sick of these ideas.
I needed a good teacher as well. To be perfectly honest.
You do
and I had
need a
one,
good
so that was
teacher.
all right. Yeah.
But I think you shouldn't. I mean, he is the most important writer in the English language. So let's make sure kids are exposed to him at an early age, right? Should be a no-brainer.
Absolutely, because for me, my memories of learning Shakespeare was it pushes you into what language can do.
Yes.
You had to make those connections and go with it.
Yeah.
And I could literally, I remember my brain expanding. Yeah. It didn't expand for much, but there was some growth.
So there you go. Teachers, if you're watching, get kids to act Shakespeare out. Although not the end of Titus Andronicus, because you'll get sacked.
Someone's clever.
You are, Josh. You are.
No, I'm not. I don't know what the ending of Titus and Andronicus. I'm going to Google it.
Then what the beginning
says, and a little
Josh.
bit of cannibalism.
Oh,
exciting. Well, that would be a good one then, wouldn't it, for kids?
OK, right. We're going to end this section by looking at the front cover of The Sun. Cressida, you've got this.
OK, King's tears. Well-wishers have made me cry. So yeah, the King has been moved to tears by all the attention, all the kindness, all the outpouring of support. Which I mean, I would feel tearful at this time. I'd be on edge permanently. So
yes, it's just a nice, good news story, isn't it?
I mean, did you write him a letter, Cressida?
Of course.
Yeah.
I haven't written to him yet.
They made actually all the bosses here, because it's GB News. We all had to write a letter in. Like, do you remember, Jimmy? We got it from.
I was there.
Got it from HR. Had the big talk from the bosses.
The thing is, Josh, people watching this will believe that that's real. You know, they will. You know they will.
It's real. Don't listen to it.
Look forward to that in the Metro.
OK, well, look, those are the front covers covered. But coming up, we're going to be talking about the death of protest, the deep state, and Boris versus Tucker Carlson. Don't go anywhere.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Marnie says being sexy in business is entirely possible and maybe even better.
Well, Marnie, this is something I say is true. I've had to live with this for quite a long time, and I think you can do both. Now, tell me, it's lovely to see you first of all.
Thank you for having me.
In all your gorgeousness. And you're telling me that often is regarded as something derogatory or something to hold you back. Is that right?
It's just this really unfair thing, this really unfair narrative that women can't do both. Even men can do it. As you know, Eamon, you can do it. You can do it all. And I just think,
women are so multifaceted. They can be mothers, they can be sexy, they can be businesswomen, they can be silly, they can be all these different dimensions. And this press push that we have to limit ourselves to one category is just unfair.
But do you think that is where some people may be wrong-footed or go wrong to underestimate you?
Exactly. There is that saying, disarm with charm. So, you know, that there is that idea that people do look at someone who cares about how they look, who's perhaps a bit feminine, and underestimate them. But hopefully I've proved that wasn't the case in the boardroom.
And thank goodness for Karen Brady. She's definitely upped the glam stakes on the show. And if anybody can prove that you can be sexy and successful in business, I suppose it's her, really. But where do you think most of the criticism comes from? Because I have to say, hard to believe, but when I was younger, I certainly got a bit of this at my old employer, being told that I had to dress a certain way, not to be too sexy, which I found hugely
you were told this by women.
I was told this by a female boss who didn't like me wearing zips on the back of my dress. Not just me, but some of the other presenters there. And I took such offence. I felt like she thought that I was some sort of, I don't know what. Do you take offence when people are criticising you that, you know, in some way they think you're, I don't know?
There's just no right answer. And as we said, I think Karen Brady is doing an excellent job at leading the charge that you can be glamorous and get the job done.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Thursday's newspapers. I'm Andrew Doyle with token white male Josh Howie and yet another woman, Cressida Wetton. Josh, let's kick off with Thursday's iNews, and Labour MPs face their worst enemy, Labour voters.
Yes, I know, you don't want to mess with them. Labour MPs concerned for their own safety ahead of Crunch Gaza vote. So this is obviously actually, the vote's now happened.
Yes.
And it went through unanimously, but this is a worrisome story because you really shouldn't have our elected representatives being fearful of the general public, which is what's happening here with the pro-Palestinian activists. And there's been a lot of incidents, including Mike Freer, who's now stepping down for suspected arson of his offices. But not just that. A London Borough Council recently had to be evacuated after pro-Palestine protesters. These are not healthy signs of a healthy democracy. There's a new Labour MP for Kingswood. It turns out his husband is Israeli, or was born in Israel, and had served in the IDF a couple of decades ago. They've been offered extra security after receiving threats. So all of this together is, as I said, I wouldn't say necessarily scared. Well, they're saying they're scared. They're scared, but it's also the impact that you're going to have on their votes. Because what one Labour MP says is how this sort of she talks about, or he talks about, a coordinated harassment of colleagues, making them very concerned how things escalate, and then talks about the vote and says, "I won't be voting in a certain way," and links those two together. It's like, well, are you saying that you're not going to vote for that because of this influence?
This is scary, isn't it?
Exactly.
I mean, Cressida, we've had this before. You know, I mean, it's a bit of a fine line, isn't there? I've heard politicians complaining unjustly, you know, people jeering at them on the street or something, or, you know, saying nasty things online. Well, we all get that, don't we? And if you're in a position of political power, you're going to get protesters making a noise around you. But there is a distinction between that and threats and harassment, where people are afraid to actually vote the way they want to vote. And, of course, it's quite important, isn't it, for a democracy that, for instance, the surgery system works, so you can go and see your politician. Your MP needs to be accessible. But with this kind of thing, that's not going to happen, is it?
Well, no, it's practically over, isn't it? I wouldn't want to be an MP now, and it's great that they're offering more protection, but it's not enough, is it? I mean, it's like it's already gone too far. You know, at this point, when you're making the decision to become an MP, you already know that this is it's paralysing, I think. And as you said, we need to be able to go and see our GPs. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Our MPs. We need to have surgeries. And if that's not possible, I mean, we're always hearing this phrase, it's a threat to democracy. This really is a threat to democracy.
So why is this happening, Josh? Because, you know...
It's because they're nutters.
Well, we're talking about a specific group of protesters here, aren't we?
Yeah,
who don't seem to think that threats of violence are a problem because they have this whole,
far-left cranks and Islamists who are predominantly making up the pro-Palestine movement. They were out today in front of Parliament. They egged one of our presenters, Marta Daubney. Patrick Christie's was interviewing some of them, and they were just coming out with blatant anti-Semitic conspiracy theories like Israel controls the UK and just ridiculous stuff.
So why is it happen particularly on the far left? Why is there this idea that they are so self-righteous that they can threaten people, commit acts of violence?
Well,
if only I'd read a book about it that talked about the hypocrisy of the far left and how they then become the fascists.
Well,
if someone should write a book,
someone should, shouldn't they?
Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to call it.
Are you? I've got something you could read first. Give you some ideas.
Very depressing stuff. OK, we're going to move on now, anyway, to The Telegraph next. Cressida, are we going to have to start protesting about protests?
Yes. The court ruling that could stop eco-protesters escaping punishment. So apparently this was today, although I haven't been able to get an update on it on Google. A hearing at the Court of Appeal may define the future of civil disobedience as a string of climate activist trials reach the court. So we know what they're up to, just stop oil, lying in the road, stopping you getting to work, stopping people getting to hospital appointments, all that bad stuff. So historically, there's been this defence, and the example they're given here is that if somebody's got a dog trapped in a hot car, you'd break the window, and at that point, breaking that window isn't illegal. You'd love that, wouldn't you?
Just say if they don't watch out.
I think if they do it with care, Josh.
Let's move away and don't worry about it's a Chihuahua. It's a very small dog in this example. Anyway, that's been used by the climate activists. They've sort of said things like, there's an example where they broke the windows at I want to say
it was a bank.
It was a bank. They caused 500 grand's worth of damage, and they said, oh yes, but if the bank understood the threat that's really happening to them, they'd support our work.
They are demanding that we accept the premise of their argument.
Exactly.
And the premise of their argument is that the world is on the verge of collapse. It's going to explode any second. And most people, including experts in the subject, which I am not, don't agree with that.
Yes, but the problem is juries do enough to let them off. So, of course, the irony of destroying all of that window, making glass is a very sort of energy-intensive process.
Yes.
So to make these huge windows again would have actually bring us that closer to death.
Goodness me. I mean, the idea that there's a degree of hypocrisy in this movement.
No.
Unbelievable.
Madness. But, of course, as in all of these similar types of cases, the danger is by closing what is seen as a loophole, by some, actually will limit our own freedoms and liberties because it could be used for valid protests.
I mean, it's tricky, isn't it? I'm a great believer in peaceful protest, irrespective of the cause. I think if I don't agree, it doesn't matter. Everyone should be able to protest peacefully. But I think once they cross that line into criminality, and particularly when they're vandalising works of art, that for me is the end of it.
I don't think the HSB... I don't think it's that great.
It was a beautiful piece.
Oh, really?
You just didn't understand it, Josh.
OK.
Actually, very moving, modern, conceptual piece.
I didn't study enough Shakespeare. That's my problem.
That was your problem. Read Titus Andronicus.
I will get to it.
A lot about banks and windows.
OK.
All right, we're going to move on to the Mirror now. Josh, Liz Truss, I've heard of her.
Yes.
She was Prime Minister, Josh.
Prime Minister, yes. Prime Minister, OK. She blames the deep state for sabotaging her 49 days as PM in Fox News tirade.
OK. Tirade seems a bit strong.
Yes.
I think she just wrote an article, didn't she?
No, I think she's out in America. She's sort of selling herself as, to the neocon, the big bucks.
Well, she's doing CPAC, isn't she, the conference? But I can't imagine Liz Truss going on a tirade. It just seems completely out of character.
I think that's the Mirror giving it a bit of a spin.
Adding a big old little word to it. There's actually two things going on here. She is saying that the deep state was sort of brought her down. There is a counter-argument that there is such a... I mean, you can call it something insidious like the deep state, but if you watch Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister, there's a constant conflict between those two sides, and being a good politician is how to work the system, game the system, to get what you need.
But that's not deep state.
No,
I mean, what you're talking about there is intransigent civil servants, which we've always had and we have particularly now.
Well, I would argue that's probably what they had. But what she's sort of relaunching herself as this kind of anti-woke woke person,
yes,
which isn't really what her prime ministership was about at all. It was about economic policy is what brought her down.
Yeah, but she's suggesting that the reason those economic reforms didn't work and that they spooked the markets was largely because even the right has become infected with this sort of left-wing woke politics.
Yeah, but I don't think that... No, I think that's exactly what she's saying. But what I would say is that left-wing woke politics, as we discuss certain movements, ideologies, it's not economic issues.
No.
And that's what she was pushing here. So when she says cutting taxes, reducing the side of government, these I don't see as woke issues.
Those aren't common. Those aren't popular with woke people, are they? Because they lead to less services.
But I would say that they are traditional political choices as opposed to what we would discuss as the woke war or whatever, culture war or whatever.
I mean, I suppose, Cressida, what she's saying is, it's odd, isn't it, that as a Conservative Prime Minister, she was unable to enact Conservative policies, and she's putting this down to this nebulous deep state, whatever
And I would
that
agree
means.
with her that everything, you know, everything's shifted so that, well, we're always being called far right, aren't we? Things that aren't far right at all are being called far right. So things have shifted such that if you're doing relatively traditional Conservative things, you are considered to be quite far right.
Yes.
Potentially. Yeah.
OK. Right, well, let's move on now to the Telegraph. Story about Boris Johnson getting a bit of some money, apparently.
Well, no, he's not.
He's not getting some money. Right.
Boris Johnson denies demanding $1 million to be interviewed by Tucker Carlson. So, obviously, Tucker's just done his Putin interview, and Boris has criticised him for that publicly. And so they've been having a sort of online spat, if I don't know, in the public eye. And so then the question is, who asked who?
Well, it's very he said, she said, isn't
Yes, exactly. And so Tucker's saying, oh, my God, he asked for $1 million. Who does he think he is? And
you see that
that's a perfect
That's just
impression.
what he's like. And Boris is saying...
You watch a lot of videos to get that accuracy.
Forever. So Boris is saying, no, not at all. The team offered $1 million, and I said it's got to go to Ukrainian charities, not weapons, charities for veterans.
So basically, each one is saying a completely different story. So we don't know, do we?
We don't know.
You know,
not really.
I'd like to think they're both telling the truth, and that
They're both famous for telling the truth as well.
Recollections may vary, right?
Isn't it? Who do we believe? I mean, I wouldn't want to put one of my colleagues down, but.
Well, I've met Tucker Carlson. He was very nice, and
I'm sure.
I
He's very nice. He's a great tour of supermarkets. I don't know if anyone's seen that. Very funny. Have you seen the very funny? He's in Moscow.
Enjoyed Moscow.
And he's going around the supermarket. He's like, oh, you put a coin in the trolley, and
I haven't seen that one.
Look at this. They've got like 4 cheeses. Moscow's amazing. Go Putin. That's what it. That's essentially the video.
Seems like a bit of a silly story. It seems like one of those spats that has just become a news story simply because of who it is.
Maybe, but I think it's a shame he's not interviewing Boris. That's an interview I'd like to watch. I'd like to see Tucker's childlike charm, and how does that mix?
What, the two of them together?
Well, what would happen?
Two charismatic men. Interesting.
And they have a completely different view of this particular subject, so it would be interesting. Yep, OK, well, you know, scrape together the money and do it. That's what I say. Let's move on now to Thursday's Guardian. Josh, a tragedy has been used to hopefully save some lives.
Yeah, Martha's Rule granting urgent second opinion to be adopted in 100 English hospitals. Now, this is a very tragic story. Marope, I hope I'm saying that right, Mills, she was senior editor of The Guardian. This horrible story. Her 13-year-old daughter had a bicycle accident, and I read the whole story when it came out, maybe it was like a year ago, and it turns out she had sepsis, and the doctors, the family who were at her bedside the whole time knew that she was deteriorating and sort of kept on requesting more opinions, and the doctors were quite intransigent and being like, no, we know what it is. And when they finally said, oh, it is sepsis, which the family had put forward, it was tragically too late. So what's happening now is that they're going to be implementing this critical team who can come in, and when a family or loved ones feel like that maybe the doctors who are dealing with the case have got it wrong, a totally separate set of eyes can come in and assess the case.
So it's a second opinion, right?
A second opinion, but they already have this system in most other countries in the West. So it was silly that we didn't have it here. They're saying that it could save, hundreds of lives. I think it's a fantastic idea. Again, why it wasn't implemented before.
Well, I mean, nothing against doctors, but they're bound to make mistakes. They're human beings, and it's always good to get a second eye on things, right?
Isn't it? And why does this need to be a specific law? I mean, I can't understand why that isn't the default anyway in medicine. And really, I think what what they're gently saying here is that it's a cultural problem, that doctors don't want to be wrong, and obviously we know hospitals are busy and all the rest of it, so I'm sure it's a difficult environment to work in, but you can't have doctors that think they're beyond...
They do. There's this whole thing, the God complex. This whole
that's what I'm gently... That's my real opinion.
Isn't it, I suppose? You know, you have to make quick decisions.
Well, this was in a specialist children's hospital, and so...
Yeah.
Anyway, tragedy, hopefully... people's lives will be
The best thing about this is that we're talking about it and putting sepsis on people's mind because it's so fast when it happens to people.
Yes.
Within hours, clearly, the situation's...
Yeah.
Absolutely. OK, well, we've reached the halfway point now, and as we dip towards bedtime, please do come back for racist AI, bad parenting YouTubers and cheating cyclists. See you in a couple of minutes.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
You have a president in President Biden who's not enforcing the law that was passed by Congress. President Obama, criticize him or not, actually enforced the law and was deporting people that had crossed illegally. Of course, President Trump enforced the law and improved the law to make sure that and worked with Mexico to have the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden has abandoned federal policy. In fact, he's deliberately trying to let in as many immigrants as possible. More for the Democrats, more is better and less is racist.
Just astonishing. And the statement that Greg Abbott put out is really feisty stuff. He said the federal government has broken the contract between the United States and the state of Texas. And in the eye numbers, Greg, are simply eye-watering. 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years, Governor Abbott says. That's more than the population of 33 states
That's
in
right.
the United States. Astonishing numbers.
And Martin, that's just Texas. If you add Arizona and other border states, you know, it's pushing 10 million. By the end of Biden's term, it'll be 11 million. A study by Yale University a few weeks ago, 3 very liberal professors that did the study estimate there's 22 million illegal aliens. So this is a crisis that was created by Biden. It's what he wants. They want unfettered access to the border. They're letting them in. It's a real hardship on the working people of Texas and other border states. And now it's a real hardship on cities that the federal government, as well as the governors of Texas and other states, are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Thursday's newspapers. Let's get straight back into Thursday's mail. Cressida, machines begin their usurping of humanity by being racist against white people.
Amazing. Google Gemini is accused of being racist towards white people. Users claim the AI bot refuses to create images of Caucasian people after asking for photos of popes, Vikings and country music fans. So,
OK.
I'm not a big user of these things, but, you know, you can put prompts into AI so that you describe what you want and it comes up with something. So you can say, give me a picture of a pope. And it does that, but it hasn't been able to give anybody a picture of a white pope.
Well, let's have a look at an example of the pope. There we go.
Yeah. That's what the pope looks like, isn't it?
Well,
I mean, maybe one day.
There are
I mean,
some
the thing
poopy
is, there's
things.
no reason why you couldn't have a black pope. But the point is that it's not historically.
Oh, there we've got some Vikings.
Oh, those are Vikings.
That was
are
the
they?
prompt for Vikings.
So this is the thing. Now you don't get this with Mid-Journey because, but the problem is that you do get on some AI systems, you do get a kind of woke intervention, right?
Yeah.
So you get it with Google, for instance. I know Douglas Murray's written about this. That when you
this is a
medieval knight, and they're all women, of course,
Yeah.
because the Round Table was known for its overrepresentation of women. But Douglas Murray once wrote about how if you Google like a white couple or married couple, you don't get white people, you get mixed race couples. It's almost as though Google is sort of berating you and saying, "We know that you're a racist, so let's just try and throw something at you." And I think that's why people object.
Well, this is it. This is proof in the evidence of in the algorithms.
Yes, exactly.
It's obviously a human hand has gone in there as they've created this. There's a few interesting things where it's not racist when it asks for, or it's not prejudiced. When you ask for samurais, it will do Japanese samurais.
I won't do white samurais.
So, it won't do.
Right.
So when it comes to other cultures, it will represent them as is. Someone did ask for a white pope.
Yes.
And got a lecture saying it's not, whilst it's not appropriate to assume that all popes are Caucasian, many have been of European descent.
So this is going to be the problem with AI and just generally these kind of machines in the future is that they're infected by woke politics.
Well,
aren't they?
there's something even more interesting that we don't have. It's a slightly dodgy thing to talk about, but people went in as sort of a competition to try and find how to get them to present a white person without asking for a white person.
Yes.
So they finally managed it.
Bad at
after
dancing,
asking for
how
a
offensive.
But yeah, they tried lots of things, bad at dancing, and but they finally got it by saying, "Show me a picture of Seamus," of someone called Seamus, and they showed 4 people, and one of them was a white guy.
Okay.
So they got there in the end, but it did something actually even more interesting. Was it took a negative stereotype about black people about affinity for fried chicken,
right?
And that's like a common trope. And it asked for pictures of people's faces in a bucket of chicken.
Yes.
And all the people who it portrayed were white.
This is utterly bizarre, isn't it? What I don't understand about this kind of stuff, Cressida, is, if there is this revisionist idea of history, right? If you're going to say that all medieval knights, or the majority of them, were women, right, then doesn't that kind of erase the history of oppression against women? I mean, why are we lying about history?
Absolutely. Which is it? It's like this constant thing. It could be. Well, yeah, OK, I know it could be. I don't doubt that.
OK, well, more Daily Mail now for Thursday. More discrimination, this time coming from a cancelled degree. But who was actually racist, Josh?
It's an interesting one. University of Chichester students launched discrimination claim after decolonising Black History degree is axed. And they have 2 cases here, really.
Yes.
One is that this course was axed, and the university is saying because just not enough people were signed up to it, it wasn't economically viable.
Yes.
And so for the people already on that course, they have a claim that they're not getting their contract met. That's fair enough.
OK. This was the course in decolonising Black history.
Yes, decolonising. The history of Africa and the African diaspora masters by research. And it was set up to decolonise the curriculum. I'm not sure how good it could be a great course, but the point was not that many people signed up, or not enough.
Yes.
What that is also... So I think that there is a breach of contract. I think that's fair enough for the people who are paying thousands and thousands of pounds to get for the degree they wanted.
Yeah.
But this idea that it also is breaching the Equality Act, because the Equality Act was... the idea was the course was created to encourage more black students into academia.
Right.
And so it breaches the Equality Act by shutting itself down. That seems far more... No, exactly. That seems far more tenuous. Then at the end, there's 14,000 signatures have signed an open letter, and 300 academics and staff, an online petition. Do you think, well, you know what, why don't one of you 14,000 people sign up to this course?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Then the problem solved.
Exactly. It's a massive go woke, go broke potentially, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if nobody's signing up for it, what? I don't know what you would do about that. Would you market it more? Would you push it more on billboards? Would you make claims about the cause?
You can't force people to do it.
Well,
can you?
no. When we hear about people not wanting to do maths and physics and stuff at school, I suppose we do sometimes have drives to try and top that up. But,
yeah.
It's very tricky, isn't it?
It is tricky. OK, a story in the Times now, Cresta, about not taking parenting advice from YouTubers. This is quite a disturbing one.
It's horrible. Ruby Frankie, parenting YouTuber, given maximum sentence for child abuse. So this woman was what she refers to herself as a mummy blogger, so she had a very popular YouTube channel giving out parenting advice.
Yeah.
Which, you know, and it was always meant to be the case that she was offering strict, what you might call like traditional conservative parenting, that kind of thing. But behind the scenes, it turns out that she was treating her own children very, very badly. And then at some point, she joins forces with a woman who is some kind of therapist, a family therapist, and it's a bit like, it reminded me of the Wests, when Fred and Rose West get together, it gets worse, and suddenly these two together were treating her children as though they were in a concentration camp, and somehow the dad gets elbowed out of the equation, comes back 3 months later, and luckily one of the children, who was 12, managed to escape and knocked on a door for help. Which is really interesting, because just this week we've had Esther Ranson saying, don't take mobile phones away from kids. They need to be able to contact the outside world.
Right.
This woman did take the phones off her kids.
Yes.
Although in the end it was a physical escape.
I mean, it's really scary stuff, this, Josh.
Yeah.
What do you make of it?
It is scary stuff. She had 2.3 million subscribers on YouTube. There's an element of being a religious nutter. That the sort of this strict Christian upbringing is what they're going for, which led to children being starved, kicked, beaten, forced to do hard physical labour, evil stuff. There's an other angle that I don't think is pursued really in the article, is how much did this YouTubing, vlogging, or whatever you want to call it, influence her behaviour towards her children in terms of the extremity that things were pushed. Obviously, she hid some of it from her viewers, but at the same time, this idea of needing to present the perfect home, the perfect children, how much of the way that she treated her kids off camera was to present an image on camera.
This came to light, the children were in such a state that there's no way you could... This wouldn't be, oh, this is good parenting video.
No,
I mean,
of course,
there's two things going on here.
I think that there's a confluence at some level, but maybe.
OK, well, Thursday's Guardian now has an interesting idea. Josh, celebrating poor people.
Yeah, this is good. Hidden Stories. Historic England funds 56 projects on working-class heritage. Now, we talk a lot about wasted tax money. I don't know where actually Historic England gets their money from, but they are highlighting places that possibly wouldn't be previously highlighted.
We get a lot of funding for race, gender and sexual orientation. We don't get much for people of lower-class origins, right?
Yes, although weirdly they've managed to work that into it as well.
Of course they have.
As much as they can.
Of course they bloody have.
But there are some really interesting things, but a pigeon fancier's enclave in West Yorkshire, there's a roller skating hotspot in Birmingham, an old bacon factory in Wiltshire. So
roller skating, that's not very working class, is it? They're really expensive, those boots.
Well, now they are.
I find the whole thing quite funny. It's a lovely idea, but it is a little bit funny, isn't it? You know, like working class people, what do? They like pigeons. I don't know. But yes, it's...
Some working class people like pigeons. But there's also like Chinatown, and so they've got these different projects. There's funding overall about 800 grand. Some of them, they'll get like 6 grand, some 25. But if previous cultures, if our ancestors had done this, we would know a lot more about the reality of the Roman Empire or the Persian Empire, all these different things, if a little bit more time had been spent studying and celebrating the lower end of the economic
this is true.
scale.
I mean, this is one of the great things about the excavations at Pompeii, is that they're digging up all sorts of things about the working class and the slaves of that society,
and that's
not
the majority
just
of the society. That was the majority.
Yeah,
very interesting. Maybe we should all go to bingo.
Bingo?
As a research for...
Is that a working class pursuit, particularly?
Well, it's not one. The ones I used to get taken to was the Speedway. That's a very...
on dates?
Brilliant.
Is that...
I'm from the West Country, but I've never dated my dad. No. But
OK, well, we've got time for this one more story. It's the Daily Mail. Cressida, do you feel unsafe competing against men?
Trans cyclist Emily Bridges has vowed to take British cycling to court after it barred transgender women from competing in the female category last year. So this is another trans story. This sport have decided to exclude trans women from the female category. I know that's not
Isn't that
always
because
the case.
they're men?
Well, yes, I think that's largely the argument. What I find so fascinating about this is that Emily Bridges is so narcissistic. There's absolutely no self-awareness in this whatsoever. To talk about feeling unsafe going... And by the way, not even cycling with what she or he would call cis men, biological men, going in the open category, which is essentially for trans people.
Yes.
Emily Bridges said they wouldn't feel safe there.
Yeah. So other trans women are men, but she's a woman.
Josh, can you explain this to me? Because why would a bloke want to compete against women? What's he thinking?
It's called cheating.
It's called cheating?
It's called cheating.
Right.
So
you're not safe if you're not allowed to cheat, are you?
Yeah, so there he says part of our life is gone now, adding that competing is not something I really want to do anymore. Because you're not going to easily win. Although, weirdly, compared to other trans athletes that we've seen, Emily was actually a champion within the male field. So way ahead of the female field, because men are just a lot stronger than women.
Well, yeah.
But there was an option. The option was, she says here, I can't compete. Yes, you can. You have been provided an open category. You can compete.
This is all against the backdrop of the men in women's prisons. These much more, in my opinion, much bigger safety issues than Emily Bridges saying they don't feel happy in their sport.
By the way, did you see the footage today of the basketball? It was like this 6-foot trans woman battered these 3 women,
see that, but
and they're all hurt. They were like someone's.
When is this nonsense going to end? Men should not be in women's sports. That should be the end of it, shouldn't it? I mean, it's not that complicated.
Well, I had a bit of a wobble recently because pronouns came up again, and there was this idea, you know, there are certain people who I would refer to Debbie Hayton probably as she, people like that. But this kind of narcissism.
Andrew doesn't know anything about this.
No, I haven't heard anything about this.
But, you know, when I hear the feminists bleating on and on and on about safety in women's toilets, I do start to nod off a bit. And I think, look, feminists, you've got to play nicely. You know, there's got to be room for everybody. But this is not a good white, an olive branch.
OK, well, just one more section to go in headliners tonight, and there really are some corkers. ADHD as a superpower, binge watcher toilet breaks, and testicles in a dish. All right.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Look, you're a respected royal biographer, and there are so many people who are on the sort of royal gravy train, if you will, people who are making a career out of gossip and speculation. But yours very much built on confidence and sources and facts. And you don't offer an opinion that often inside your book. But when you do, I suppose, therefore, it carries a bit more weight. So when you say that the Sussexes are easily offended and, you know, effectively pretty prickly, what do you mean and what have you based that on?
Well, on numerous their riposte to any given situation in their books, in their TV interviews. And let's not forget, there have been a lot of TV interviews, 6-part Netflix drama, Spare. You see time and again that they feel that they feel resentful. They feel that, you know, something hasn't gone their way and that this is part of some sort of calculated campaign against them. And actually, I mean, when you've got a fast-moving story, I mean, for example, in my book, I go into those frantic hours after the death of the Queen, and everybody's trying to sort themselves out. And Harry writes in his book Spare how you know, no one will return his calls and he can't get through to anyone, and it's sort of it's just all a bit me. And actually, the whole kind of royal machine, if you like, is a team effort. And I just think it's very sad because, you know, Harry and Meghan, they had such potential. And now when we do tend to hear from them, on a royal matter, it's just to say how miserable they were being royal. And that was, you know, they were royal for whatever it was, 600-700 days. They're post-royal now for over
Can you envisage a scenario where they're back. They're back in England and they're back in royal life?
I can't envisage a situation where they're back, as it were, as part of the sort of royal working unit, but I could certainly see it becoming a kind of normal thing for them to keep.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the final part of Headliners, your first look at Thursday's newspapers, and we're going to kick this section off with The Guardian. Another article about ADHD, Josh.
What are you saying?
Very funny.
Brilliant.
What's it about?
ADHD may have been an evolutionary advantage, research suggests. So ADHD is very on trend at the moment. Everybody's got it. Everyone's getting it. People want to get it.
Do they?
Yeah, everyone's like, oh, I got ADHD. Oh, yeah, this is why I'm just distracted. Nothing to do with mobile phones.
It's not that ADHD isn't real. It is. It's just that it sounds like an opportunity for a lot of people to have excuses.
And there was a documentary proving how when people go and get private, what's the word?
Treatment?
Well, not treatment. Diagnosis.
Yeah.
They get overdiagnosed, is it? Like 99%.
We were warned about that as a teacher when I was training. They said to us, you know, a lot of the kids who say they've got ADHD have just got posh parents who can afford to get the right doctor. And actually, they're just really annoying kids.
Yes, exactly.
You know?
So, but this is very interesting because there's the suggestion that if it was as common a trait as it seems to be, normally these things will get phased out over time if it has a negative impact on us. So the suggestion would be that actually there's a positive reason for so many people to have it. And they did this experiment where they had this computer game where they would pick up berries from a bush, and then over time the bush would get less berries. Anyway, the people who had ADHD went to different bushes because they were distracted.
Yes.
So they'd be like, oh, I'm going to go to this bush. And then, so there's the idea that for foraging, it would help us as humans if you had ADHD because you would go and wander to a different bush.
I do like that word, foraging. We don't use it often enough, do we?
I did a lot of blackberrying as a child. I think this sounds true. Do you know what this means? This means... This means that diversity is our strength when it's really diversity. Because the different appetites for bushes means,
Anyway, but they're going to do a real life... This is a computer game experiment, but they're going to do a real life experiment with berries. So, and then you can also make some money.
Let's go on to The Guardian again. It could be that the people who most need to hear this have just popped off to the toilet. What's it about, Cressida?
Binge watchers more likely to need multiple nighttime loo breaks, study finds. So, if you sit down and watch, I think it's 5 hours, it's a lot of television a day.
That's no television. Love you, viewers.
Then
keep watching.
You're 48% more likely to have this problem called nocturia, which means going to the loo in the night.
Is that right?
Well, apparently, yeah. They don't really know why. It might be because you sit down and drink a lot. That's one obvious thing.
Yeah.
But it also could be that sitting, not doing exercise is linked to type 2 diabetes, high blood sugar will make you pee more.
Feels like a non-story to me, Josh. What do you think?
No, it is quite interesting because it's one of those things where they've found this correlation, but it's the chicken and the egg, and you don't know whether it's because people are, as they say here, some people being overweight or that's why they're watching more TV, whether there's a connection with age.
I'll be honest, my interest is limited. So we'll move on to this story now in the Mail, and they're talking about the phones. Put the phones down!
Yeah, health time bomb alert is issued over blue light emitted by phones and LED office lights as scientists claim it may be toxic to the body. Old school lights, back in the old 90s, the good old days, had red and blue components, and we need a bit of red. So the interesting part of this is that the idea is we're red-starved.
Yes.
We live in a red-starved environment, and if we get just 15 minutes of red light, then it can help diabetes go into remission and help with your blood
I've
sugars
always
and whatnot.
mistrusted these phones, you know.
Yeah, but that's right. But get a red light bulb.
And that helps, does
Screw it in.
Yeah, but really what
Bit
it's
of sexy
saying
time
is that it helps blood glucose. Go for a walk. I mean, that would do the same thing,
my
wouldn't
God.
it?
Get the
Burn
red
some
light bulb
calories.
and have some sexy
But
time.
what you can also do, though, is with the phones, is you can set them so that they don't have the blue light, right? So
You can have it diminishes it, yes.
Yeah,
So
that's what
and phones now do that automatically near bedtime.
Yes, but I have it set for the whole day.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's why your blood sugar's so perfect.
Exactly, and I have my red light because I am a prostitute.
I didn't want to say anything, but that's what we all talk about.
I'm moonlighting. Finally, the Daily Star. What's this one about, Josh? Naked men?
Yeah, Naked Man Festival to shut down due to lack of blokes willing to strip off. This is in Japan's Somen-sai Festival. It's been running for 1,000 years!
Right.
1,000 years, and now no young guys want to go and wrestle to get this amulet. And it's kind of like a Groundhog Day type festival where when you get the amulet, it's going to...
They wrestle for an amulet,
Wrestle
naked.
for prosperity, fertility...
Well, but what does the amulet represent? You know, it's a prize,
Women.
isn't it?
Do you know what? I
Probably.
think I've seen a film like this. Anyway, that's all we've got time for. The show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Thursday's front pages before we go. The Daily Mail is leading with bosses must make allowances for menopausal women. The Telegraph has Speaker on brink after walkout. The Guardian is also running with that story. Fury in Commons forces Speaker to apologise over Gaza vote chaos. The Times has the menopause story. Respect the menopause or be sued, firms told. The iNews Commons chaos as MPs walk out of Gaza vote. And finally, The Sun has an uplifting story about King Charles. Those were your front pages. That is all we've got time for. Thanks ever so much to my guests, Josh Howie and Cressida Wetton. I'm back tomorrow at 11 o'clock with Leo and Paul. And if you're watching at 5 a.m, please do stay tuned because now it's time for breakfast.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin. More wet and windy weather to come, particularly lively gusts tomorrow across parts of the south. We've seen plenty of rain today from this set of weather fronts. They are heading out into the North Sea, but more are following on behind, bringing showery rain to Northern Ireland and a good part of Scotland through this evening. Now, for most of England and Wales, much of the night will be dry and clear, could turn a little misty, one or two fog patches in places, but look, more heavy rain returns by the time we get towards dawn. A mild night again across the south, but starting to turn a little colder further north. Cold enough for the showers in northern Scotland to fall as snow over the hills. It's rain no further south, giving us cause for concern. Heavy rain falling onto saturated ground could cause some flooding, so we do have a Met Office yellow warning in place, and then the wind's really whipping up just for a short period across the southeast through the day tomorrow. Could cause some damage, potential for some disruption as those gusts suddenly whip up for a time. So wet and windy across much of the south, particularly the southeast. Large parts of the country, it's a bright and blustery Thursday with sunny spells, but more showers coming into Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Friday also a bright and blustery day for many, a brighter day over the Midlands and East Anglia compared to tomorrow. There will be plenty of showers coming in on Friday, and again that cooler feel. Temperatures actually close to average, but because it's been so mild, you will notice that chillier feel.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
Mike Freer joins me now. Mike, thank you very much for coming into the
studio. Thank you for inviting
me. Firstly, how are you?
It's been a busy day, and it's been quite a traumatic experience. It's a real wrench to walk away from a job that you love, but also a constituency that you've become, you know, I live there, it's my home, and I regard many of my constituents as friends, and it is an amazing place, and to walk away from that is really quite, it's quite an emotional wrench to think this was a job I loved, but unfortunately I can't do it anymore.
Can you talk me through the process? Because you mentioned about the alleged arson attack, etc., being the final straw. But this has been a really quite vile journey to get to this point. So what kind of threats have you had? What's that look like?
Well, like every MP, I mean, you day in, day out, you get abusive emails, you get low-level stuff that, whether we should accept it, but we do, it's graffiti, it's things like, I've had, in the past, I've had a mock Molotov cocktail left on the office door, meaning we had to evacuate the whole building. I've come out of my house and found a note on my car. Where I live is common knowledge, but what I drive is less so. And it's a few weeks after John Mann had the wheel nuts on his car tampered with. So that all kind of makes you get a bit, what on earth's going on. But I've had 2 run-ins with the organisation that was Muslims Against Crusades, and people like Anjem Chowdhury, who was behind that organisation, been to prison. But online it said, I used to do surgery in mosques, so I wanted to go out and see people. And online, there's a picture of me saying, you're not welcome in our mosque, let Stephen Timms be a pointed reminder. So it's not very subtle.
Well, just for our viewers and listeners who might not remember that,
Stephen Timms, of course, was stabbed by a woman who'd been radicalised. Thank heavens he survived. So it was a very unsubtle.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.